Out on the edge of Scotland beyond the last busy harbors, beyond the last familiar shore, the Atlantic doesn't arrive. It rules. It pushes and pulls the world like a giant breath, and sometimes it decides to take something back. That's why the Flannan Isles mattered. They aren't really islands the way people imagine islands. They're 7 hard, uninhabited rocks called the Seven Hunters, lifted from the sea west of the Isle of Lewis, where cliffs rise sharp and unforgiving and the wind always seems to be on the move. A place like that doesn't need ghosts to feel haunted. It only needs silence. In 1899, a lighthouse was built on Eilean Mòr, the largest of the group, a white tower perched high above the water so that ships could find a safe line through the darkness. It was new enough to smell of fresh stone and paint, but old enough almost immediately to become part of the sea story. And then, in December 1900, the story turned into a riddle. 3 men lived there to keep the lamp alight: principal keeper James Ducat, assistant keeper Thomas Marshall, and occasional keeper Donald MacArthur. Not sailors, not adventurers, working men with routines strong enough to hold their minds steady through long months of isolation. Imagine their days: the same stare, the same metal, the same careful cleaning of lenses, oil measured, wicks checked, glass polished until it held a cold, clear shine. The sea was the only neighbor that never stopped knocking. When the weather was kind, it was a distant roar. When it wasn't, it was a living thing, clawing at the rock and flinging spray high into the air. People like to romanticize lighthouse keepers, lonely heroes with capes of storm and mystery, but the truth is quieter and braver. Most of their courage looked like discipline, like waking up when the sky was black and doing the work anyway, like following rules that existed for a reason. Don't go out alone in dangerous weather. Don't leave the light unattended. Keep order, because order is what stands between you and panic. And yet order is exactly what made what happened next so unsettling. On the mainland, the days before Christmas were the usual busy blur. On the sea, ships threaded their routes carefully. At some point in mid-December, at least one vessel noted something wrong. The light on Eilean Mòr was dark when it shouldn't have been. But weather and distance can make people hesitate. A dark lighthouse can be a failure, or a trick of fog, or a momentary shadow. The sea doesn't always let you check. The last official entries at the lighthouse were made on December 15, 1900. After that, nothing. No more notes. No more tidy lines of duty. Just blankness, like a page torn from the world. 11 days later, on 26 December, the relief ship finally reached the Flannans. The steamer Hesperus carried fresh keepers to replace the men who had been alone out there for months. As the boat approached Eilean Mòr, the crew did what crews always do when they near a working lighthouse. They looked for signs of life. A flag maybe, a figure on the path, a movement at the door. There was nothing. The wind slapped at the ship's rigging. Waves shouldered against the rocks below. The lighthouse stood there solid white, perfectly ordinary from a distance, yet wrong in a way that made your skin tighten. The captain sounded signals. Still nothing. Relief keeper Joseph Moore went ashore. Think about that moment. One man stepping off a boat onto an island that has no people except the ones he's come to meet. He climbs the rough path toward the compound. He's expecting routine, a gruff welcome, a few tired jokes, the smell of oil and damp wool, the look of men who are relieved to see another human face. Instead, he finds a closed gate, a closed door, closed but not locked. Inside, the lighthouse doesn't look like a place abandoned by choice. It looks like a place that was interrupted. Beds unmade. The workings tended to as if the keepers had done their jobs right up until the moment they didn't come back. The lamp equipment had been cleaned and refilled. And then the little details that twist the knife. A set of oilskins, heavy waterproof gear still hanging, as if one man had left without it. But 2 other sets were missing. Some later tellings at a toppled chair and a meal left in a strange pause. Details that became part of the legend and poetry around the case, even as other accounts caution that retellings sometimes embroidered the scene. Moore searched. The sailors searched. The island is not large, but it is cruel. Jagged ground, sudden drops, and the constant thud of water below. They called names into the wind until their voices felt small. No answer. No footprints that led to safety. No sign of 3 grown men who had lived and worked there. Only the lighthouse, still standing, still watching. When the news reached the mainland, it didn't arrive gently. It came like a wave of ink across newspapers and tongues. The headlines were bold. The speculation was louder than grief because people fear an empty space more than they fear a sad truth. Some said there had been an argument about a woman, about money, about pride, and that violence had followed. Others whispered of foreign agents and secret kidnappings. It was an anxious time. Rumors travel faster than facts. And of course, the old imagination rose from the sea itself, a sea serpent, a giant bird, a phantom boat, the 7 hunters taking what they wanted. But the Northern Lighthouse Board did not deal in phantoms. They dealt in storms, schedules, and rules. An investigator was sent, Robert Muirhead, superintendent of the board, a man who knew the keepers and knew the island's dangers. When Muirhead arrived on 29 December, he walked where the men would have walked. He studied the landings where supplies were stored. He looked at the battered places, the points where the sea could reach higher than any sensible person would believe. The harshest truth of the Flannans is this: the sea does not need a long time to take you. Muirhead's conclusion was practical, and that practicality is part of what makes it chilling. The likely story, he believed, was not a conspiracy but a chain reaction. Perhaps a storm surge had damaged equipment near the landing. Perhaps a storage box or ropes had shifted, something that demanded attention because the lighthouse depended on those supplies. 2 men, properly dressed in oilskins, go down to secure it. The third stays above until he sees something go wrong. A slip, a wave, a shout swallowed by wind. In panic or loyalty, he runs out without his gear, breaking the rule because rules mean less than a friend's life in the instant you think you can still save them. And then comes the Atlantic's final word, a sudden, monstrous wave bigger than the mind wants to accept, rising fast enough to erase 3 men and leave no bodies to return. That is the explanation most people can live with, because it fits the place. It matches the torn, punished character of the rock and the physics of water meeting cliff. It doesn't require ghosts. And still, it doesn't feel finished. Because we want the world to behave like a story. We want beginnings and endings. We want evidence like a closing door. But some mysteries are simply a question the sea refuses to answer. The lighthouse stood as if nothing had happened. Inside there was order, duty, the trace of ordinary life, and then absence. If you listen carefully to the Flannan story, you can almost hear why it never lets go of people. It isn't only the vanishing. It's the humanity caught inside it. 3 men doing a job that mattered. 3 families expecting them home. 3 names that should have had the dignity of an ending. Instead, they became a warning, written in salt, that even in a place built to guide others safely, safety is never guaranteed. Years later, the lighthouse would be automated, because machines don't need warmth or sleep, and they don't panic when the wind screams. The light still flashes, still marks the edge of the world for passing ships. The islands remain uninhabited, rock and grass, seabirds and spray. But the question remains exactly where it first formed, between one duty and the next. What happened after the last entry on 15 December? If you stand in your imagination on that cliff above the western landing, you can picture it in 2 ways. In one version, the sea is simply the sea, and the mystery is only that we weren't there to witness the final, tragic minute. In the other version, the one that lives in poems and late-night conversations, the islands keep their secret like a clenched fist. The wind covers the evidence. The waves erase footprints. The lighthouse keeps shining because it must, while somewhere beneath it the Atlantic holds 3 stories tight as stone. Either way, the Flannan Isles teach the same quiet lesson. Some places don't just have weather. They have will. And when you hear of the keepers Ducat, Marshall, MacArthur, you don't have to choose sea serpents or spies to feel the shiver. All you have to do is picture a door closed but unlocked, a world in perfect order, and the sudden, impossible truth that the men who kept the light were gone.